The Denver neighborhoods of Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, Five Points, Cole, Clayton, Whittier, and Skyland are located in the middle of the largest food desert in Denver. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, a food desert, shown here in green, is defined as a low-income neighborhood or community with limited access to affordable and nutritious food. Other sources define food deserts as rural or urban communities without commercial access to food within 1 mile of a residential household. In an effort to better understand food access in Northeast Denver, local residents and community organizations work together to form the SHARE Network, a collaboration of community representatives, nonprofit organizations, foundations, and other partners. Through community meetings, data collection, and discussions, this project attempted to understand what a food desert looks like in action. What are the experiences of residents? What are the barriers to healthy eating and active living? And what can these stories tell us about future solutions to the issues of community food insecurity?
What we do know about the place where we live, the neighborhoods where we're all living and working in Five Points, Whittier, Cole, Clayton, North City Park, Elyria, Swansea, Globeville, is that if you live here, you're more likely to experience the kind of disease like diabetes associated with poor eating and maybe poor access to food than if you lived somewhere else in Denver. So it's an individual challenge sometimes that we face, as Lupita recounted, sort of make an individual choice for yourself and for your family, but it's also a community challenge. It's about working together as a community and taking charge and saying we can together ensure that we have access to healthy food and that we're going to learn and make the right choices for ourselves so we can live healthier lives and that our kids can live healthier lives.
One of the first steps in the food assessment was the collection of personal stories about food access and consumption from community residents. Resident researchers connected with their neighborhoods through surveys and community meetings, documenting and highlighting the lived experiences of the community.
In a way, yes, you're collecting data, but in a much bigger sense, it's about advocacy. It's about being a food advocate and having conversations with people about what really moves them. What is it that they're struggling with in a personal way?
One of the key lessons from the data and story collection was the fact that food access not only looks differently from community to community, but also family to family. Individual stories highlighted different barriers to healthy eating, ranging from cost to transportation, and even just quality of accessible food. And yet, these stories shared a community focus in common as patterns emerged. Obstacles to individual access were connected to the community's story.
Yeah, this is a historic issue, and a lot of folks don't know, but this community was redlined kind of back in the day, and so right in the alley at Ray Street, African Americans weren't permitted to live beyond a certain section of the city, and so
if you're not welcome and encouraged to be outside of that, then you've got to build and thrive right here. Five Points area, any need you had, you could meet it within the community. You could walk to, from your medical needs, dental needs, shoes, shopping, restaurants, movie theater, dancing, whatever. When that food was taken out of the community, then that caused the neighboring businesses to suffer, die, and go away, because when they had to leave to go get the food, while I'm out, let me handle all this other stuff. And so you start supporting, your local people less and less.
The national story about food access is often one which has seen stores in urban centers move to suburban communities or close entirely. Stores follow the consumers with higher income, often the households who are moving away from urban centers. This map highlights the trends in the number of grocery stores by zip code in Denver over the past 15 years. The zip codes of 80216 and 80205, shown here in red, are the home of Northeast Denver Food Desert. From this data, we can see that the neighborhoods in these zip codes are the only communities which have seen a decrease in the number of grocery stores. In fact, nearly every other zip code has seen an increase in the number of accessible food outlets. Taken with the fact that local businesses are closing, not only are residents in urban areas finding that they must travel further to get to a store, but in addition, the dollars that they use to buy food are leaving their communities. This increased distance between stores means that owning a car became one of the primary connections between a family and a grocery store. As travel time increased, residents became more reliant on public transportation for access to their nutritional needs. In a car, the expected travel time from Harrington Elementary School to Safeway is 7 minutes. By bus, the same trip takes 27 minutes.
Pues yo hago la mayoría de mis compras es en Sam's, que queda aquí en Stapleton, y me hago 45 minutos de ida y 45 minutos de vuelta. Me hago 1 hora para ir, pero yo siento que en esas tiendas es donde he podido encontrar alimentos de buena calidad. Yo sé que está retirado de aquí dentro de mi comunidad, pero yo quiero que mi familia coma cosas saludables. Entonces por eso yo prefiero salir o tardar en ir a un lugar y a otro, pero para poderles buscar buena calidad a mis hijos.
First of all, you know, the definition of a food desert is, 1 mile walking distance of healthy, accessible, cheap food from your house. And so you can't, when I started in this district, we had 1 grocery store for 55,000 residents. So that just puts in perspective. And we're about, 30 something square miles. So there's a lot of areas that are well within the food justice kind of ring.
Even with physical access to food, other factors such as the price and quality of food affects community members' ability to meet their nutritional needs. Urban food centers are often the last on supply routes, meaning that the produce that arrives at stores is not as fresh as the options in suburban stores. According to survey data, urban food centers often keep produce on the shelf for longer periods of time, meaning that the spoilage of fresh fruits and vegetables adds another barrier to adequate food access. According to the Share Community Food Assessment, 38.4% of residents interviewed listed spoilage as their biggest barrier to eating fruits and vegetables. According to recent census data, the residents of Northeast Denver, on average, have a lower household income than other communities in Denver. This means that the residents have less flexibility around food choices. This chart shows the average prices of produce and other perishable foods available for purchase in the community. This map shows what food options are easily available around Northeast Denver at a similar cost. For the cost of a pound of apples, a family could purchase 2 fast food sandwiches, which are not as healthy but will leave them feeling full in the short term. This is the choice faced by the residents of the Northeast Denver food desert. According to data collected during community interviews, of the residents who ate 1 to 2 servings of fruit and vegetables per day, 96.9% state that it is always or sometimes true that they cannot afford to eat a balanced meal. Access to food in the communities of Northeast Denver is both a factor of what is available, but also what is affordable.
Sometimes you go to buy oranges and they're like 50 to 75 cents an orange. Sometimes people tend to buy a bag of chips because it's way cheaper. It's like $1.09 with tax. And instead of spending the money on fruits and vegetables, they rather buy a bag of chips or cookies or something to feed the kids. And sometimes even vegetables, you shop for fruits and vegetables and it's a little bit more what you pay for that. And you know it's healthy, but you want to spend less, so you buy more junk food.
The United States Department of Agriculture recommends that a family of 4 budget $826 for food per month. This recommendation equals 25% of the average household income in Northeast Denver. As a result, 40% of respondents to the food assessment survey said that they could not afford to eat a balanced meal. Even further research conducted nationwide found that the same food options recommended by the USDA cost more in urban environments than they do in suburban stores. According to the research, chain stores offer food options at a lower cost due to their large supply networks, but these stores are less likely to be located in urban-built environments. Free store space in urban areas increases the cost of operation through higher rent costs, less room available for parking spaces, and increased travel times by food delivery trucks. All of these factors make it less likely that the cookie-cutter box stores will choose to expand within communities with less access to fresh produce.
No, I can drive for about 15-20 minutes in my neighborhood and just be exposed to Fritos, cookies, Hostess. I think Hostess kind of went out of business, but you know, and those are the options that our kids, when walking from school, are exposed to.
Part of the challenge that the kids face in our community is that they're completely surrounded by messages that are telling them over and over again that this is the kind of stuff that they ought to be eating every day, that this is good food for them. Now, if you go to Whole Foods, or you go to Sprouts, or you're living in one of those neighborhoods, this is not the messaging that you're seeing on a regular basis, but this is what our kids see every day.
To better understand the economics of food access, local residents met with community leaders and local businesses to talk about the possibilities of increasing the sale of produce in local corner stores. This would allow for residents to be closer to food sources, but also keep their dollars within the community, strengthening local microeconomies.
King Super is how could we get it at a price point that we can sell it that would be useful to neighbors. And in Beverly, talking about also the production opportunities that are right here in our neighborhood that we could potentially even begin to produce here.
According to local corner store owners, the biggest barrier to selling produce in the community are tied to the lack of produce distribution networks. These networks connect farmers with stores, getting produce from point A to point B. They connect the seed with the supermarket, tracking the growth and production of food within the needs of consumer demands.
Food distribution networks in the state and around the country are largely driven by the placement of supermarkets and superstores. So if you live in a neighborhood where a supermarket has determined that there isn't a strong enough marketplace for them to be, then there's a good chance you live in a food desert.
To combat the lack of local, healthy, and affordable access to food in their communities, local residents formed the Neighbors Together program. This community connected residents with gardening resources and educational opportunities, allowing them to begin to grow their own produce. Regular meetings brought together community members who could share their experiences and advice for healthy eating. One of the immediate results of this group was the building and maintenance of El Jardín de Pato Alegre, or the Happy Duck Garden, which offers communal gardening opportunities for residents down the street from their homes. Residents attended urban agriculture trainings at the Grow House in Globeville to support them in their own growing and production of produce.
Todo lo que hemos aprendido está muy bien, muy bueno y simplemente de que uno a veces planta y nada más por plantar, pero uno no sabe que llevan su proceso, que cada cosa tiene tiempo para poder salir, o sea, para poder tener sus frutos uno.
También yo le estoy informando todo lo que he aprendido a mis hijas, a mi esposo también, a mi esposo, porque mi esposo no lo veo muy interesado, y yo siempre todos los días tengo que estarle diciendo, ¿verdad?, la importancia, y él también tiene que ayudarme, ¿verdad?, para poder así los dos, ¿verdad?, de cómo sembrar nuestros propios alimentos. Y también yo también estoy muy interesada en ayudar, porque hemos ido también con otras personas que ellos necesitan ayuda de la comunidad, también para ayudarlos, y a la comunidad se les ofrece esos productos, ya sea con donación.
Que ellos, enseñarle a mis hijos una herencia, podría decir una herencia que ellos, de buenas costumbres, de saber saber que ellos sepan lo que están comiendo, de dónde lo están agarrando, y sobre todo que nos van a ayudar a economizar dinero, porque estos productos ya no los vamos a comprar en la tienda, sabemos que son sembrados y cosechados por nuestras manos, y para que ellos también ellos sigan en un futuro cosechando lo mismo que yo les estoy enseñando.
And that the city council is working on, and hopefully will get approved by June, and it's fresh fruit produce sales from your home. So you will be able to grow your own food and then sell the produce. And some folks probably won't grow their own food, but you may have a neighbor who is selling it within 2 blocks of you. Like, man, I need some cabbage, or I need some beets, I need to go over here and get some. You can take care of all that within 2 blocks of your home. And I think that is a grassroots, microeconomic perspective, and that we're trying to work on as well. You've got to have both to really eliminate this food desert.
One thing, when you break a sense of camaraderie in the community, then you don't have that combined spirit and power to start filling gaps and becoming creative to meet needs. You know, you don't. If you don't know your neighbors, and then you're not going to work with them to do anything. You're not going to talk to them about what you do and don't like, or let's work together on it. That's not going to happen. Now we have more of a case. I mean, because you could do the projections, and we go neighborhood by neighborhood and say, how much food would Whittier need to grow to feed Whittier? Whittier has 5,000 residents, so that translates to X amount of pounds or tons of food, okay? So then that can break down into, well, that could mean a modest goal of 2 to 3 yard farms per block in Whittier. Boom. But then look how much room to grow there is, because there'll be some blocks that want way more than that. And then if you create a little beehive like that, and then Cole does it, and then, that's not unrealistic,
There was a time when the neighborhoods of Northeast Denver were in better balance. There were community stores that provided access to healthy food and a thriving local small business sector. That's not the case now. Today, grocery stores don't see their neighborhoods as a viable market. Food distribution networks don't reach our blocks. Small business owners without these anchor businesses have dwindled, and those who remained respond to an overabundance of cheap, unhealthy food that surrounds our children and families in our stores and on our billboards. But this is not a story about victims or deficits. This is a story about neighbors coming together to build a community that supports health for everyone. Here in Northeast Denver, we have land to produce healthy food. We have corner stores to sell it, and we have voice to change systems and policy to increase access to healthy food. We can create and sustain a healthy neighborhood. There is no one solution like there is no one story of access, but that is not to say that there cannot be a story of progress and movement, a story of community, agency, and praxis. We can begin to take steps to start writing this next chapter today. The Share Food Assessment's findings have led to 3 recommendations for sustaining just local food access. First, we can continue to increase the local production of produce for use within the community. Already, steps are being taken to address this option with the recent passage of the Residential Home Sales Ordinance by the Denver City Council. After registering their households, community members can grow and then sell produce from their gardens to their community, recouping costs and helping support future growing. While this offers a valuable new option, we also need to take into account residents without access to a backyard for growing, and instead use window boxes in apartments and collective growing spaces they share with their neighbors. The next policy step is making sure that these growing options are also supported through local political action. Secondly, this food economy is supported not just by our dollars but also with our feet. Urban communities offer opportunities for direct access to food that does not rely on a car or bus, but can be located at the block down the street. Through supporting local farmers markets, local produce sales, and local businesses who are willing to increase their sale of fresh produce, the solution is one which does not replicate the current model, but instead promotes new collaborative opportunities. Stop by a farmer's market not just for the food, but the music, the conversation, and the connections. Finally, we can increase the educational opportunities around already existing healthy eating and active living opportunities. Starting with schools, community events, and local organizations such as churches and youth groups, we can shed light on the already present options. Start a cooking class for your neighbors. Have an open house in your garden. Sponsor a community dinner at your church, whatever allows us to raise the community dialogue around our food. These activities are already happening. It's not about starting over, but connecting the progress that is already being made. Our question is, how do we move from a food relationship to a food system? A connection which looks past communities as consumers to populate stores, but instead as the solution to the issues of food insecurity that plague Northeast Denver. Through working together, sharing ideas and produce, the solution is located within our own activities. We need to be the authors of our own food story.